This episode of our podcast is brought to you by Duliban Insurance. If you live in Ontario, Canada, and are looking for the best price and coverage for your Tesla, give Duliban a call at 1-855-385-4226 or visit their website at dulibaninsurance.com/Tesla. Good evening, good day, no matter... Oh, that's a stupid intro. One of these days, I'm going to get it right. Welcome, everybody, to the podcast. I'm your host, Trevor Page. I'm joined by Eric Camacho and Ian Pavelko. How you doing, guys?
Aloha.
Bonsoir tout le monde.
There you go. There's the French in him. You know what? This podcast is not going to be the usual Tesla news. We have been wanting to talk about full self-driving, specifically about a really great PBS episode that aired back in October called Look Who's Driving. And if you haven't seen it, highly, highly recommend it. I'll put a link down in the video podcast description so you guys can actually find a location if you can to try and watch this thing. Anyway, so that's the topic of tonight because it really deals with autonomous vehicles, full self-driving. Again, you know, Elon has said in the past recently that they're hoping to get FSD on the Teslas to be feature complete by the end of the year. We're literally about 3 weeks, a little less than 3 weeks away by the end of the year. Anyways, I'm not hanging my hat on that timeline. But I thought it would be a good opportunity to actually get in here because we have delayed this discussion for a little time. So Eric has plentiful notes, so I'm going to let him take point on this, and then Ian and I can add our own color on this. So take it away, Eric.
Thanks, Trevor. So we got a lot of show notes here. What I'm going to do is kind of do a rundown of the show itself in order of how things happened during the broadcast, and you guys can certainly interject commentary and thoughts throughout. So the special aired on October 23rd of this year here in the U.S. And on PBS stations, which is PBS is a wonderful. Support your local PBS stations if you can. So the episode opened up reviewing the accident that happened.
Hold on, Eric, I got to stop you. I got to stop you for 1 second. Remember, it's sponsored by David Koch's Science Foundation.
Yes.
Just thought I'd put that in there.
Yes.
Carry on, sorry.
And PBS viewers like you.
Gotta love that tagline.
Yeah. And
not Patreon, but PBS viewers.
No, of course, and they thank you. So the show opened up on what was the first known death. The woman was a 49-year-old Elaine Hertzberg. She was walking her bicycle across a road in Tempe, Arizona, on March 18th, 2018, at 9:58 p.m. when there was a collision with an autonomous vehicle. What it was Uber was testing autonomous cars, and there was a person in the driver's seat,
Safety driver.
So there's more on that accident later in the episode, but it opened with that, talking about the accident and how she was the first death from an autonomous vehicle. Some statistic that really was eye-opening, I think, at the start of the episode was that every day in the United States, so this is not a global figure, just here in the U.S., there are roughly 100 fatal car crashes per day, which is a daunting number if you think about it. Nearly 75% of Americans surveyed are afraid to ride, not drive, but to ride in a driverless car. And I think a lot of that, when I first heard that statistic, I thought initially it's a lack of knowledge, it's a lack of understanding, but also I think a lot of companies don't have enough evidence to prove that these cars can be 100% safe. So it's understandable that number, but I was surprised to hear how high it was. I knew it'd be a pretty big number, but I think it'd be 75%. There was a number of different interviews intertwined in the episode. Each year, some 35,000 people die in car crashes in the United States. It is nearly all because of human error. So we keep that in mind. So we talk about why really fight for autonomy. It's in due part just because humans are largely to blame. Robotaxi fleet reduces the number of cars on the roads. It reduces pollution and the need for private cars, private owners. It also helps people with mobility issues. There was a segment in the special where they showed a blind person sitting in an autonomous car and how amazing that experience was. Now, some things to note here. There were a series of different interview candidates. Tesla was asked to be part of the special. They elected to not do that. But some of the folks who were interviewed were professors at universities like Duke University, MIT, Stanford, and others. There were high executives from companies like Mobileye, Zoox, Torque Robotics, and many others that are all in some way designing or have been part of autonomous teams in the collegiate level. On average, there is one death for every 100 million miles of driving in an autonomous car. I'm sorry, excuse me.
Human drivers.
Human drivers. I'm sorry, human drivers. Correct. Thank you for the correction. That means it's you could actually get 3.4 million hours of driving, which is equivalent to 390 years. That's a lot. One of the interviews here from Carnegie Mellon University, Raj Rajkumar had said in his interview segment that driving is the most complex activity for a human because there's just so much synaptic information coming in that your brain has to process in a very, very finite period of time. There was a good part of the show that I thought really helped get into just how far back autonomous vehicles were in motion. So in the year 2000, Congress asked the Pentagon to develop vehicles for autonomous combat use. 2 years later, the Pentagon then had a research agency called DARPA that announced the Grand Challenge, which was to win $1 million. This contest featured 13 vehicles that had to drive 142 miles autonomously. The first challenge was an epic failure as the farthest any one of the teams got was 8 miles. 8 miles.
I remember that result when it happened live. Yeah.
Right. That's crazy. The following year, they upped the prize to $2 million. Stanford had a team where they had a car called Stanley that used AI software, and Stanley won. It actually completed the trek. 2 years later, after that, so 4 years after it started, they did another contest, but this time with traffic. So not just, a clear road, but actually having traffic to see how it can happen. They called it the Urban Challenge. And that was one of the first times one of the teams introduced lidar, which we've talked about in the early stages of Tesla's growth. 6 of the 11 teams who competed in that Urban Challenge did complete the course. And then after that segment had aired, then they went back to the opening segment of the show and dove into more about the NTSB portion of the investigation of the crash that happened in Tempe. During the investigation, the NTSB had found that the driver was not watching the road for nearly 7 out of the 22 minutes prior to the crash, including 5 out of the last 6 seconds. She hit the brake after she collided with the cyclist. Systems detected that Elaine, the cyclist, was detected 6 seconds before the crash. So as she's basically walking her bike across the street, the car obviously detected it, but neither the car nor the driver stopped. And it didn't alert the driver because, in due part, that's the way the system was set up. And Uber also disabled, this was a Volvo, Uber disabled the vehicle's emergency braking system because Uber wants to avoid jerky rides. So there were a number of different things that led to the crash for sure. Obviously, and this is one of those things where it debates, why was she crossing the road at night in a poorly lit area? There were other different criteria there. I, for one, had somebody on Twitter had been asked that question after I linked the story, and I had said, I actually don't give any blame to Elaine personally. To me, based on what I saw of the video and of the investigation report that I read, she had ample time. She was fine. We oftentimes cross streets when we look both ways and see that there's no traffic coming, so I don't fault her. But if you ever do get a chance to read that story and at least see the investigation report, I recommend you do that.
Yeah, a certain amount of circumstances just kind of snowballed.
Yeah.
To the point where it was just kind of inevitable. She was distracted. They disabled they didn't have a warning system to tell the driver there's something imminent. And of course, as I said, they disabled the automatic emergency braking systems.
And the car decided to do an evasive maneuver 1.3 seconds before the crash, which is really little time to do anything to avoid the accident.
Yeah, at those speeds, yeah.
Yeah. Now, after that, there was a segment explaining automation for some folks who didn't understand what levels 1 through 5 were. We've obviously talked about that quite a bit. Tesla now is essentially like a 2-3, but 4 and 5 is really the icing on the cake. That's where you get into truly driverless cars. Then there was an MIT study where they had a woman who was behind a Volvo. She's someone who tends to like having always control of the car. So she was in a Volvo, and so she was driving in a way that a lot of Tesla drivers are recommended to drive, which is just have vigilance, hands on the wheel, but not actually manually trying to steer, just kind of pay attention. So she said she liked the experience of driving the car like that, but again,
she didn't trust it.
Just really could not ever bear to take her hands off the wheel. Then they featured a Model X owner, a male driver, who, and they actually have footage of this, but he's in his car driving completely hands-free for a great length of time, like checking stuff on his phone. I mean, he might as well just been, shaving in the car for while he was doing. But yeah, it was interesting to see those two different contrasts of drivers. One having 100% full faith in the system, and one sort of keeping her own vigilance because, again, she just likes having control of the car. Then they led to the conversations about Tesla. So there was a segment where they showed clips of Bloomberg's interview with Elon Musk some years ago. These were not recent news clips with Bloomberg, but there were clips discussing what Autopilot is, and there were some disputes with someone named Peter Norton from the University of Virginia, who was very critical of Autopilot, both in terms of name, its practical use, and things like that. Then there was a segment showing YouTube videos of early adopters. In a way, again, showing that they had full faith and trust in Autopilot, so they're largely hands-free. There were fun videos of YouTubers who, were doing like arts and crafts and all kinds of strange stuff. But again, those videos are on YouTube. You can always find those. And those are early Autopilot videos as they were. Then it kind of reared itself back into a tragedy. There was a YouTuber, his name was Joshua Brown, and Josh Brown had recently died at 39 years of age. He was driving down a strip of road in Florida, where long stretch of road where there's actually cross strips. So as trucks and stuff can make turns.
Divided lanes, yeah.
Right, divided lanes. So he's driving down the street, had Autopilot on, and for some reason there was a semi-truck that was making a left-hand turn in the opposite direction, the opposite side of the street. Was making a left-hand turn, had to cross the median to then go across the way. So Joshua's far back. The truck is making its turn. Neither Joshua nor the vehicle slows down to avoid the impact, collides directly into the rear bay of the truck, killed instantly. It was later discovered after the investigation from the crash that Joshua did not apply the brakes. Autopilot didn't really do anything in terms of applying it because, as they found out, and Autopilot was not to blame because the NTSB said Autopilot detects traffic and other certain conditions in your flow, in your direction of traffic. It does not actually detect objects that are obviously cutting across and going in a different direction. So there was I
think it's important to note, sorry to interrupt. Yeah. I think it's important to note that crash happened in 2016. So this was an AP1 car. Right. Which was powered by Mobileye technology, not the current stuff. So we have to be very careful about where the break point is here as far as, the tech today as opposed to when it was.
Sure.
There's also something else that wasn't covered in the show, but I think bears important relationship to that crash is that the local police, when they inspected the scene, discovered that there was some type of a tablet computer playing a movie that was running in the car. And I mean, that's not 100% certain that the driver was watching that, but you could probably infer that there's a very strong possibility that he was watching a movie instead of watching the road.
They say in the video he wasn't on his phone. They could track the activity, and he wasn't on his phone. So again, it's hard for us.
He had plenty of time to stop, though. However,
correct. If he had any eyes on the road at all, you'd have to think.
Yeah, they did say that if he were to apply the brakes once it was detected, he had ample distance and
10 seconds.
So there's just no way he could have been looking at the road.
Yeah.
Anyways.
So cover that for a bit. And then there was Tesla, again, did not choose to participate, but it did indicate that Tesla is always improving Autopilot and asserts that Autopilot drivers have fewer accidents as a whole, which we know is true. We know, especially now that they're putting out the reports every year, that there are certainly fewer and fewer accidents. Even all the quarterly report calls do put that out there. So a question that they asked was, does autonomous vehicles create a false sense of security? Which I thought was a kind of a really probing conversation, and I figured we can delve into that if we elect to. But they get into after that a segment that explains the various complications of why autonomy is so hard. And one analyst said that cars have to do 3 things to be autonomous. And essentially, this is replicating what we as humans are able to do.
Exactly.
So the first thing is seeing everything around the car. So going back to the crash with Josh Brown, he, that early version of the vehicle, which I think he had a Model S. It was a Model S.
Model S.
Yeah. So his, that version of the car didn't have as many cameras and didn't have full usage of the computer the way that our cars today do. So given that in mind, that's obviously we're seeing improvements in that over time, is being able to have the computer get a 360 view of what's happening around you. Task number 2 is then to understand what it is that it's seeing. And a part that they go into sort of back and forth and explaining all this, and they did a good job of it, I thought, in the documentary, is showing these various companies with demonstrations of both in the car and looking at all kinds of different footage of just drives that they made in their localities, is going, even the tiniest of things, like a stop sign at a different angle. Or they had one good example of when they were driving through this area where there was a gentleman delivering food, but he had a box like on his shoulder.
And he had a turban.
Right. So we recognize it's a person, but how does so cars have to learn every kind of image of like what a cat looks like. So it's like teaching a computer to learn what we as humans have developed over the course of, decades of new knowledge. So that I thought was pretty impressive. And the third task is determining the path and then controlling the vehicle to actually then take that path. So we now see a good example of that with Smart Summon, where, a car can be in a certain spot. Now the car is looking at the geography of the parking lot. Where's a good place to go? Is this an actual paved road? Is it a sidewalk? Is it a grassy area? So that's things that we're seeing even with that, how hard it really, really is. So after that, a gentleman was, we were told that machine learning nowadays in 2019 is about 90% accurate. But as they've said, that's not nearly good enough. It's only training data where you're saying that accuracy. It's not real world actual driving by in a car data. So the real world results could actually be even worse than that 98%. Edge cases, which they talk about ad nauseum in the document or in the documentary, can give computers issues. For example, what is an umbrella? Was one of the examples they asked. An umbrella that's open or closed, I mean, how does that affect, obviously, what the car interprets?
If the car's never seen it before, it's never been tagged properly.
Yeah. And not only that, there are different colors, different sizes, different styles. Is there a pattern? Is it solid? So, again, all of that's are ones and zeros to a computer, but it's trying to teach them what those are by default. So, imagine it's basically like you're building a Google's data bank every time you're going for a drive, which is insane. Then they demonstrated, there was some test cases out in California with the folks of Waymo. They demonstrated how a car was backing out of a driveway and then approaching a pinch point. So they were showing like different speeds, like how fast does the car back out? Is it going out slowly? Is it jutting out really quickly? So all these different scenarios of what you could experience on the road, and then how the car handles each of those different tests. Merging into traffic. They actually did an interview, a ride along with the folks of Mobileye. And they were saying, like, merging into traffic is about negotiation. I'm going to turn here. You're going to go there. We're going to speed up and slow down. So how does a car handle that differently than a person? That was a good video there. Then they had a Thunderhill Raceway, a team from Stanford tested a DeLorean motor car. Yay! That DeLorean. And they were just essentially doing like almost like infinity circles, a figure eight. They were drifting.
The computer was driving the car, and it was drifting.
Yeah,
it was awesome.
And they had the cones set up, and you just see the car going and going and going. It was if you even get like a snapshot of that somewhere, it's a pretty cool clip. Autonomy would be made easier. This is something I wrote down that I thought was pretty cool. Autonomy would be made easier if there were no rule breakers. People. But of course, there always will be. So that's kind of the gist of the entire thing. I didn't want to get into all the different interviews they had. There was obviously some supporters of autonomy. There were some that were very critical of autonomy. But it was a fantastic 50 some odd minute episode. You can also get the DVD, which of course helps support PBS and all the good work those folks were doing. So that's the show in its summary. So let's go ahead and discuss autonomous vehicles.
Well, the first thing that struck me is that I was really hugely disappointed that Tesla decided not to participate.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that they bashed on him a little too much about the accident thing. Like they spent an inordinate amount of time talking about Autopilot accident.
Well, I don't so much mind that, but what bothers me is because Tesla wasn't there, they weren't able to bring to light the fact that how many thousands of accidents have been avoided because of Autopilot. I mean, we see videos every day of people showing us incredible. I mean, I actually have a clip that I saved from my trip down to Bethel, New York, when I went to see the Woodstock site. And I never shared that with you guys, but I mean, there's a deer that ran across the road and I felt the braking come on and I actually saved that clip. That's just one small one. Now, I don't think I would have hit it, but it would have been awfully close if the car didn't start braking before I did. Mm-hmm. And how many videos have we seen out there on Twitter and YouTube of people and semis moving in and the car moving over? So yeah, the fact that we know that there's been definitely injuries and lives saved because of the technology, and that wasn't allowed to be shared because Tesla didn't want to come in and bring that. What's interesting, though, is I wonder if they weren't sort of at odds with some of the participants already in the show. Like, we know that they had a big falling out with Mobileye, who were featured prominently. And one thing that I found interesting, a little background research on some of the other players, Zoox, which is like one of the newer ones operating out of San Francisco, apparently has several ex-Tesla employees now on their roster, and Tesla filed litigation against them this spring. I think in March or April they filed a lawsuit against them for proprietary information or something that these employees brought to them. So I don't know if there's some other angle why they didn't want to participate. Still disappointing. The other thing that bummed me out is one of the people who's an absolute superstar in the field from MIT is Lex Fridman. And they had all kinds of other people there. How the hell is Lex, who is the man when it comes to automation and everything about it, about autonomous driving, how is he not on the show? Like, that just blew my mind. Mm-hmm. I don't get it. I really don't understand. So those are some of the big takeaways for me, anyway.
Well, I think at the end of the day, if they were to do a proper documentary on this, we'd end up with the Englishman type of 3.5 hour long documentary, and I don't think most
the Irishman
have the Irishman. What did I say? Anyway,
the Englishman. Close enough. People from the UK now flaming us.
Sorry. I don't think anybody told Scorsese to cut it back a little bit. But anyways, yeah, I think if they were to get all the right players in place, you'd end up with a really long, and you would end up with a different product. I mean, in most of these cases, these type of things only end up having to be 1 hour long, so they have to kind of pick and choose. But yes, I'm with you. I'm disappointed that Tesla didn't actively participate in this, and again, we don't know what the angle is behind the scenes. Even though it's a 2019 documentary, and they do make several references to things that have happened in 2019, there's a big gaping hole in that narrative, which is what Tesla dropped on the world back in April of this year with their Autonomy Investor Day, and it's something that popped into my head today, and I was thinking about it because there's something that just popped in my head today, and I have to talk about it here for a second because I don't think anybody's voiced it. I haven't seen anybody voice this on the internet. Now, I'm probably not the only one that's thought of this, but nobody's actually said it out loud. So it has to do with timing. And what I'm getting at here is, remember back in March of this year when Tesla made the changes to Autopilot, right? There was a lot of brouhaha. They not only reorganized what features fall into what camp. Remember, we used to have enhanced Autopilot, and then they sold FSD. Mm-hmm. And then in March 1st, they switched it so that every car came with enhanced Autopilot, which is two parts, traffic-aware cruise control and auto steer. Everything else fell into the FSD camp. So the first part you got for free, although there was a little bit of a price bump in the car price. But I think what's happening here, in light of what happened at the same time as well as what happened the very next month, is that people were focusing on the wrong thing. People were focusing on the price aspect and how it affected them. And I get that. But if you go back in time, now that we have 2020 vision, we can actually go back. That very same month in March, the S and the X got the new Hardware 3 computer. And in April, they started shipping Model 3s with that computer. Now, in April, they also had the full self-driving investor day, as you want to call it, where Tesla laid out all the cards on the table. Now, if you put this into sequence and you look at it, remember, this whole thing is under the safety umbrella. This is, that's the whole context of this documentary here, is safety. And we know that Tesla is pushing Autopilot as far as safety is concerned. So if you look back and you read between the lines here, the changes with the Autopilot re-rigging the feature set, in addition of the Autopilot 3, and the fact that Andrej Karpathy got on stage and said, we need data for edge cases, it makes it patently clear that all of this was on purpose. They wanted to make sure that all the cars going forward from that point had this new computer in it, so that they could, and all the cars had auto steer, because that's the important disengagement data that they need. And the fact that the whole fleet is connected together with the auto data, so that they can gather these disengagements, so they can get those edge cases. So, like I said, when you go back in time and you look at the whole brouhaha over the Autopilot thing, now that the smoke is cleared, it makes perfect sense why Tesla did that. And I think that's the underlying thing that's what's going on here, is the switch over for Autopilot and all the cars especially was to deal with this edge case situation that they made a big deal about in the documentary. So anyways, I don't think anybody's voiced that aspect yet, but there it is. I think it's painfully obvious now to see exactly what went down, despite, the disruption that happened.
Sure.
But I think that's exactly what's happened. FineLab has a line of protective coatings that were engineered to protect your Tesla's paint, leather, carpet, plastic, and wheels, effectively blocking all those UV rays and environmental factors before they ever get to ruin your brand new baby. FineLab offers a complete line of car care products and ceramic coatings for both the do-it-yourselfer and professional detailers. Did we mention we also have the world's first self-healing coating? Check us out at finelab.com, that's spelled FEYNLAB, to see the science behind the self-healing. Check out our product catalog and click Contact Us for a free quote from a certified installer in your area. FineLab and Tesla, we were meant for each other.
My take on the documentary, to kind of piggyback on what Ian was saying, I have a very different take on it. Not that I disagree with anything Ian said. I just have a different perspective. I think the special focused on two components of autonomous vehicles. And I know that Tesla was sort of sandwiched in between all of it, which is why it is a focal point, especially for our show. But I think there was two things. One is, how do we explain what autonomous vehicles are, and how are we pacing with that technology? Because ideally, the lack of knowledge from the novice vehicle driver is that they hear it and they, maybe they associate Tesla, maybe they don't. But the idea of just saying a driverless car for a lot of folks just kind of wigs them out.
That's the wrong term to use.
Yeah. Correct. So, but there are those who will argue that Autopilot itself is also the wrong term to use. So there's obviously been a lot of words written about that very topic. But to that end, I believe that the special focus on those two key things. And so it starts off with showing you in such an outlier case, and that being the first crash involving a death with an autonomous car. It sort of sets now the tone of, well, this is the challenge we're faced. Is what do we do with that? Because it probes a good question. If there is an accident with let's say there's two autonomous cars and they're in a crash, who's at fault? How's insurance handled? So those are kind of things that were sort of as
the ethics of the whole thing,
right? So there's a lot of questions about that. So to start off with that, and then dive into the challenges that people have had trying to get autonomous vehicles started. I mean, the DARPA experiment, when they showed the video clips of that, it's cool to watch it. But again, that's in 2000. We're talking 20 years ago when that started, but the technology didn't start then. Obviously, that was already in development for a while. But the ultimate goal is to save lives, right? That's the preeminent conversation here, that it's about safety. So the idea that there wasn't such a clarification that Tesla has made advances in this while also addressing, this other thing. I don't think any single company ever came out of that. Like, did Uber come out looking good? No. To me, Uber looked far worse with the entire episode than I think Tesla did. I think what they did with Tesla, and I think it was done tastefully in my opinion, is they just presented storied cases of incidents that were involved with the technology. Yes, they were dated. Yes, there's been advances since then, but I think it's more about the infancy issues that had occurred as a result of these autonomous systems, these autonomous programs, and then the challenges of what's to come. Going into the episode later on and talking about the outlier, those test cases, the weird things computers have to learn. Tesla is still doing it now. I mean, every time you mention now about when there's a disengagement with the steering, when that happens, that data gets sent to Tesla, and then someone's reviewing the data to find out why did that happen. I've had a number of disengagements, this past 7 days, because there's some weird thing where my vehicle is not staying in lane correctly because the lines are painted right. A vehicle cuts me off all of a sudden. I find that I can control the deceleration more smoothly if I'm driving and easing off with one pedal acceleration versus the car doing it on autopilot. So there's a number of different scenarios there. So all of that is stuff that they're learning. But yeah, to make it short, I don't think Tesla came off as bad as we might be making it sound. It's just that it's unfortunate because those cases do make a lot of news coverage. And they showed videos of other Tesla incidents. I mean, that's certainly not the only one. There was one in California. There was the one here in Delray Beach, Florida that happened last year. So those also made the rounds of fatalities. But like anything, this has been bantered about a number of times. Every Tesla accident that involves a fatality, even recently with the gentleman who crashed in the back of a police cruiser, that makes the news because, a car drives into a house, the person blames Autopilot. Like, yes, that's going to continue happening. But if there was some other auto manufacturer that had some feature of something and, all of a sudden now these trucks keep crashing into whatever, you go, well, this Ford pickup's got such and such. Like we're now blaming technology for accidents, and so it's just we investigate and we find out that's not the case.
We also know as owners that Autopilot's improved tremendously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, we just got another update, and now it does traffic light and stop sign recognition.
Allegedly.
Well, I know.
Yeah, we don't have it.
It's early days, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's part of the suite. I mean, you can't have full autonomy without recognition of what the lights and the traffic lights are doing, let alone a whole bunch of other things too.
Yeah.
So these are steps that they have to take in order to do it. And the way Tesla does it, as we know, is they put out a feature, they test it internally, then once they feel it's confident enough to send out to the fleet, they send it out. They gather the disengagements, and it goes back into a vicious loop of reiterating the data.
The hamster wheel just keeps going.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And and nobody else that I know on the market right now that has any kind of this level of autonomy cars has anything close that will do software updates like that. All the cars on the market, even the Volvos that you buy, it's always going to be the way it is, as far as I understand. Anyways, I haven't seen any. I know somebody who has an S90 and he has a lane keeping, but he's not taking it in for software updates. It doesn't exist on those cars. So those cars will always forever be what they are when you first buy them. I'm not saying that all of the electric cars will always be like that, because we know that several manufacturers have announced plans to do software updates. How far they're going to take it, I don't know. There was another point too. The gentleman from Zoox had made a point during the documentary. He says, well, we feel that level 3, which is the one where the car does everything but it's supposed to alert the driver, we don't think that is actually a tenable case. We don't think that it could ever be good enough for that. So they want to skip level 3 and go straight to level 4, which is where the car absolutely does everything.
And you know what? I think that's the right approach. I mean, I read a hell of a lot. Jason Charchinsky from Jalopnik's book, Robot Take the Wheel, was very enlightening on that. He interviewed a lot of people. He spoke to a lot of people in aviation who obviously have a huge amount of invested time with autopilot systems and pilot, ability to re-enter the control of the vehicle, the plane, whatever it is. And there's a lot of studies that say that if you're disconnected from what the vehicle's doing for too long, it does take you an inordinate amount of time to regain control. So I think, and this goes back to your point earlier, Trevor, this might play back to Tesla's strategy, where they've gone back to, there's really two very different levels of autopilot. There's a basic autopilot, the sort of the EAP mode is disappeared, and then you get to FSD. And I think those are the two sweet spots. If you maintain autopilot as a driver aid We know statistically that has great results in,
Mm-hmm.
Reducing driver fatigue and eliminating or reducing the severity of accidents. But as the driver is engaged all the time, you don't have that long area where you can kind of wander off. So if used properly, and the MIT study supports this, Lex's study showed that over 13,000 drivers using Autopilot, for the most part, were pretty on the ball, and when they needed to intervene, they could. So I think Tesla's got that mix right with the current technology. And then after that, FSD, if it's what Elon says it is, will take you right to level 4, level 5. So in effect, Tesla's strategy, I think also, if you look at it that way, is to skip level 3, because that is kind of the gray zone, where there's a lot of risk.
Yeah, you have to remember all the cars that they've been shipping over the last few years have the full hardware suite in the cars. So whether you pay for Autopilot or not, they can still get the data out of the cars if they need to. So they have this massive fleet that can gather the data for them. I mean, if you look at the Zooks and the other guys, all they're doing is driving around San Francisco with a handful of cars and doing lidar. And that's a topic for another day, or I don't know, we maybe can cover it here. I mean, Elon made a very good point, last year before they introduced, the Hardware 3 computer, is they want to travel down the harder path, which is doing everything through visually, not lidar. And I agree with that in principle, in the sense that we as drivers, humans, we only have these two senses, right? Our two eyes, largely, for driving. The cars have a much bigger sensor suite. However, and I think that is the right way to do it, in the sense that if you can go down that harder path and you can get the cars to actually do everything visually, and hence why they're training their systems, why they have this new dojo thing coming up, and they got that more powerful computer, I think they can actually lick that problem. However, it's not infallible. We've all experienced, we're in the middle of winter here. I mean, you get salt on the cameras, forget it. You're not getting lane change anymore. If you get snow in the front of the car, and if it sticks, God forbid if you don't have a ceramic coating, even I have it on my car, sometimes the snow gets to the front, guess what? You lose the radar. And when you lose the radar, not only you lose traffic aware cruise control, you usually lose cruise control completely. Yeah. So the vision-based system, while in principle is great, there are weather elements that can really throw a wrench into things.
Well, that's why I think long term we need to have, and some of this was tested too, because they didn't just have lidar on the roof of the car, which is basically that spinning dome. They also had some combinations of different solutions. So ideally, and Tesla made the I call it a full faith jump without the parachute to go into an optical system. That's true. But they may down the road go, okay, well, do we just build in warmers so that the cameras can be clear? I, for one, on a wet, moist day here in South Florida, all of a sudden get blind spot detection alerts because it can't see because one of the cameras is sort of obstructed. So we know there's limitations even still. I think if you get the machine learning part, the AI part down to a science, and they can get that right for level 4, level 5 autonomy, then I think the little things, the weather controlled conditions, can be remedied through other solutions as long as the computer knows what to do once it sees it. So maybe there's a combination of them, but I don't
know. I think there would have to be some redundancy in there. And we know that the Hardware 3 computer has redundancy built into it. I mean, that was one of the things that on the documentary that they said, one of the researchers said, if the computer fails, you get the spinning wheel of death. Right. Your car stops. I mean, Tesla knows this is why the Hardware 3 computer has 2 power supplies, 2 chips. I mean, and the computers are much like aviation, where they vote against each other, and that's where the decisions are made. Right. But I'm saying that the hardware suite, or the sensor suite, on the other hand, doesn't have enough redundancy in terms of the cameras, because, like I said, if you lose one of the side marker cameras, you can't get the auto. You lose the lane changing, and then once they get to the robotaxi fleet, and let's say they got a bunch of these cars. I own 5 or 6 of the cars, and they're out running around, and all of a sudden one of the cameras gets obscured. Who's going to go out there and wipe the camera off? You can't expect the drivers to do it.
Exactly.
Well, but that's why I think, for me, who was toying with the idea of getting FSD, I opted not to, in due part because I have zero idea if this is ever going to be a thing in the next 10 years. It's entirely plausible, because of regulatory approval, that we may not see FSD approved for a decade. It's entirely possible.
I think it's possible. Unlikely, but possible.
Maybe, I mean, maybe not, but like, I mean, obviously, the more companies like Mobileye, Zoox, and others, and Tesla that are doing all of this testing, like Tesla alone cannot be the arbiter of level 4, level 5 autonomy.
No, of course not.
So it's obviously good that there's competitors out there trying to do, get their share of the market. Waymo, Uber, you name them. I mean, they're all in the documentary. But I think it's imperative that we understand that it's going to take a substantial amount. I mean, the two test cases they referenced in the episode, especially the opening segment where they talked about the crash in Tempe, that's going to make regulatory approvers go, time out. Just pump the brakes, because they're going to say, right, if you have a 98% success rate in controlled environment testing, wonderful. Now, we've seen in road test cases, that number is not 98%. And my guess is that number's got to be 100% solid before they even consider signing off the possibility of living level 4 vehicles on the road. And that may not be.
I don't. 100% is too much. I mean, you're going to be chasing nines here at this point.
That's it. It's levels of nines. Exactly.
Is what how many levels of nines can you chase, right? Yeah. So it can never be 100%. It's just not possible.
I have complete faith that Tesla has the hardware suite and the know-how, and certainly the data gathering capabilities to achieve level 4, level 5. My only fear is with the hardware we currently have, it's the camera's lack of ability to self-clean. I just thought that's a bit of a miss. The fact that there's no washer nozzles in any of the cameras, because you can heat them. Like the one in the windshield is heated. Like I've come out to my car, there's a foot of snow on it. There's this little square where the cameras
are. B-pillars get warm enough too.
Yeah, they can warm themselves. Thing is, but salt buildup, that just makes it worse, because when you evaporate all the water, you're left with this opaque white salt film. And at some point, even with the best AI, it's not going to be able to see through this cataract-like, coating of salt.
That's true.
You need like liquid washing. And the back of the car, in a heavy snowstorm rolling down the highway here in Quebec, there's huge, because of the drafts in the back of the car, it sticks snow
to the car.
Yeah, exactly. Like after a rally, I got 6 inches of snow welded to the back of my car. Heating will take away some of that, but they're going to need some type of a liquid washing system.
They have to do something. I'm in the habit of trying to remember when I get on the car before I get out there, if the weather's been foul or whatever, to just go around and just lick. Yep. Not lick them, but just use your
all do it
and just clean it off, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, exactly. So I don't know if it's a case of Tesla being California, Florida, weather's nice and stuff. You don't really get salt on the road, but salt's a problem. I mean, it's not just that; it's dirt and stuff.
Well, mud too. People in dirt roads or very muddy areas are going to experience the exact same thing. You have to have some way to wash the cameras.
Now, I don't doubt that they have future plans. I mean, they've kind of let the cat out of the bag. They're already working on hardware for computer or whatever the heck they want to call it. They got new chips that they're working on. So this is not an end to what they're working on. I'm sure the sensor suite's going to keep getting better. This is not fully baked yet.
There could be retrofits,
right? I mean,
you
want to see how hard full self-driving is? Just go and use Smart Summon. That damn thing is so timid, it's almost useless. So anyways, it's a hard nut to crack. They got a lot of work ahead of it. Even though it may be feature complete internally, absolutely letting it out to the world for testing and regulatory approval is still going to take several years for this to.
I want to stress this again. If you haven't seen this, try to find a way to watch it. It really does make you think. Especially if you're a Tesla owner, it really lets you into the world of how hard this all really is. I mean, so much accolade has to be given to all these various teams, the collegiate teams who've done the urban challenge test with DARPA, and even now with how real production vehicles and how they're handling things. I mean, it's hard to say an auto commercial now for some autonomous feature where someone like Volvo offers this, Ford's got this, I mean, Subaru's got this, Tesla has. You're going to see that all these vehicles now have some kind of a smart technology in it. Cadillac is a big promoter of that too. But it shows you just how far we've come in a very large span of time, and just how far we still have yet to go.
Yeah, literally every car manufacturer has some kind of plan. Some are known, some are not. The ones that were in this documentary are not necessarily manufacturers. They're just, the Googles and the Waymos and stuff that are working on that. So anyways, it's still an interesting subject. We're heavily married to Tesla at this point, so they seem to be still the leader as far as deployments are concerned, because nobody else has anything of that type of caliber as Tesla's putting out. But anyways, we'll keep an eye on it. I have a hard out at a certain time here, guys, so I think we should...
Questions!
Yeah, let's jump into questions here.
Absolutely.
I want to say thank you for everybody for submitting the questions. Once again, just want to remind you that when we do the podcast the day of, or sometimes the day before, depending on timing, I put out a tweet asking for people to submit questions via the Google form. So if that's something, if you're new to the channel, new to the podcast, and you want to participate in that, make sure you follow me on Twitter. The handle is @Model3Owners, and watch for that tweet so that you can submit your questions. All right, first one comes in from Ken. He says, will the swap to 3.0, he's talking about Hardware 3 Autopilot computer, require a trip to the service center, or is this something that a mobile ranger can perform? Now, we answered that last week, so we'll answer it again today. If you have a Model 3, yes, because it is a liquid-cooled computer system as part of the waste heat scavenging system that they do to recover heat, to heat the car and the power electronics. If you have a Model S or a Model X, it can be done by mobile. The longest part of the install is the software update that it has to take. I've been told by some service technicians it can take about a couple hours to do. Speaking of which, I should just mention that Little Birdie told me that some service centers are starting to receive Hardware 3 upgrade computers for Model 3. They've been doing it now for a little while for S and X. Also, I was also told, make sure if you've bought FSD and you're going to get the computer upgrade for free in your Model 3, do not call the service center asking when it can happen. You will be put into a queue. They will call you. So it's basically a case, don't call us, we'll call you. So anyways, just want to put that out there so that everybody understands that that is starting to happen. All right. Let's see here. Next question comes from Just Air, and he says, what are your thoughts on the CBC National's latest three-part EV segment? They seem to keep ignoring the market leader, Tesla, and focus heavily on traditional manufacturers. The CBC is government-funded, so I don't fully understand why why there's a standoffish nature talking around Tesla's accomplishments and merits. Yes, I have been watching it. They're definitely better than they have been in the past, because before it was just like, you can't go anywhere. They're slowly changing their tune. Why they're ignoring Tesla? I don't know. Again, I think in a lot of ways, some of the media still focus on the fact that, Teslas are $100,000 car. Nobody can afford them. Here's Hyundai. It's $40,000 or whatever. So anyways, I don't know if it's part of that. Although they did go to, an EV meet locally here, and there's plenty of Teslas around. So I don't know.
They had the chance, Trev, because they had Jeff Don on there from Dalhousie University, who is Mr. lithium-ion genius, right? He's like basically leading the charge at Tesla.
Yeah, you also have to remember that
that should have been an Eric one.
You also have to remember that Jeff, even though he's under contract from Tesla, I don't think he has any authorization to talk about anything that they're doing at Tesla, or even infer that he's working with Tesla.
Oh, okay. Well, then that would explain it,
right? So
he's probably
has to be super careful about
Tesla. Who's Tesla?
Well, I don't think he would. I mean, if he was asked directly, he would just say, "Yeah, well, can't really talk about that." Anyways, that's just my opinion. All right, next question is from James. He says, "This one's for Ian. I'd like to soften up the suspension on the Model 3. What would this entail? As you know, the roads in Quebec are really bad."
Well,
yes, they are bad.
There's two things.
Have an hour to spare.
Oh, nice. No, this is an actual easy one to answer. Change your springs and shocks for, softer units. Unfortunately, aftermarket, we tend to go the other way. Anybody who makes accessory springs, aftermarket performance companies, tends to make them shorter and stiffer. Trying to find a taller or softer spring is really difficult.
What about the coilovers from Mountain Pass Performance?
That's a possibility. Sasha Ennis from Mountain Pass Performance would be a great guy to reach out to, because his kits are somewhat modular. He might be able to locate, a softer rate spring, because it's a fairly universal size, and build you a custom kit that would have a softer rate.
I went to see a shop, and he showed me them. They have an adjustment screw on the top. They drill a little small hole.
Yep.
And you just put an Allen key in there, and you can just dial them in.
Well, it's true. Yeah. Well, there's two components to it. When you're talking about a softer, there's two things that control the firmness of the ride. There's the spring itself, which has a
You
certain
preload.
weight. Exactly. So you can preload it, you can make it shorter, you can do whatever. So the spring has a certain stiffness in it. And then there's the shock damping. So that's the little oil passages that control the motion, the rebound. Well, there's compression damping, which is like spring, and then there's rebound, which is when it bounces back up. So by adjusting the shock, you can make that motion softer, or you can make it really firm and kind of jerky. And you generally want to tune that ideally to match the spring that you have. But there's a certain range. And I know on Sasha's, he was saying there's a huge range of comfort possible. So maybe by taking Sasha's and running them at the softest damping settings, you'd get something close to what you're looking for. But yeah, ideally you'd want both a softer spring and a softer shock. Reach out to Mountain Pass. Maybe they can hook you up with what you're looking for.
I'm going to throw one more in there because I did see something. If you contact Mojo in Florida at his website, you can reach him as wrapmytesla.com.
Signature Custom Wraps.
Signature Custom Wraps. Thank you.
You're welcome.
They put air suspension in one of the Model 3s. They rigged something up. I've seen it in one of the videos. Actually, our friend Tesla Tino there, it's at Raphael, went to one of the shows, and he had a shot of the front trunk, and they put a compressor in there and a bunch of other stuff. So if you want air suspension, looks like there's a way to do it. I don't know how much it would cost, but that's one way. There's some kind of air suspension system.
Good.
Yeah. And I know that Tesla said that, maybe they might add it to Model 3. I don't think they're going to add it to Model 3 at this point, but anyways, that's a possibility. But I think probably a good set of coilovers or something like that. Something that's adjustable. Mountain Pass would be the first place I would talk to anyways. Let's see here. We talked about FSD. Renee submitted a question. He's talking about the edge cases of FSD and stuff. So we'll kind of skip that question because we kind of addressed it here during the show. Let's see here. Anthony. He says, I've been waiting 14 weeks for my Model 3. I'm based in the UK. Zero feedback from Tesla on when the car will be delivered. Originally promised delivery in 2 to 12 weeks. Why can't Tesla communicate to folks who have put down sizable deposits? Where is the sales support service? Yes, where have we heard this before? Yeah, sadly to say, the number one... look, I'll say it to you right now, Anthony. The cars are awesome. You're going to love it. Tesla's communications still needs a lot of work. You also have to remember, now I don't know when you ordered. You say 3 to 12 weeks. When I ordered my car, it said 2 weeks, and I thought, okay, it took me 7. When Tesla switches to the start of a quarter, they build European and Chinese cars first because those take the longest to get the transit to be delivered by the end of a quarter, because that's what matters to Tesla. They want to deliver every car that they possibly can. So they send out those cars out to the furthest reaches first, and then towards the latter part of a quarter, they switch to North American production because it's easier to ship those out overland loose by. So unfortunately, you didn't tell us exactly when. 14 weeks. That puts us when? Anybody got a calculator?
Well, I also want to just make this clear. How much money you put down doesn't matter, because when you take the car from Tesla, that car is paid in full. Yeah. So if you put $5,000 down or $50,000 down, you have to pay the car in full to take the car anyway. I understand where he's coming from. This is a story that's been repeated thousands upon thousands of times. Even I had a delay in delivery of my car. I was told it was going to be sometime earlier than what it was. It was delayed by about a week and a half. Not a huge deal. The only thing I think really is a problem for some owners is if you're looking to do a trade, if there's some time sensitive component to the transaction that I need to have this done before I can do this other thing. I get that. But oftentimes, if you have a representative who's been in contact with you through Tesla, who's sort of guiding you through the process of your paperwork, right? Not even that, even just the operators. Like I talked to somebody who was based out in Las Vegas, who prior to delivery at my service center had been in touch with me, like, "Hi, Eric, I'm Erica from Tesla," and this whole entire thing. So that was a person I could reach out to, and I even have their direct number, and I can call her and leave a voicemail and say, "Hey, I'm just calling to see how things are going. Is the delivery date still on target? Are there any delays? Anything?" So they often will not preempt themselves to contact you. I know there are applications Tesla uses internally to sort of denote conversations, make notes. If they have to bump a matter up to a higher officer, things like that, they can do that. But I think it's important to understand that you are among tens of thousands of people on a daily basis waiting for delivery of a car. If you have someone who's already been in touch with you, who sent you an email, something about your delivery, just reach out to that person and say, hey, look, I'm just, it's been a little bit longer than expected. I haven't heard anything. You're in the same boat as a lot of folks. I've been in that boat before. So it's not that big a deal. You know, if it's 3 to 12 weeks and it's now been 14, I get it. It's like ordering from Amazon. I was told 3 days. It's been 5. Like, shit happens, okay?
Yeah.
But at least be understanding that there might be some actual reason. Tesla just may not be vocal to tell you what that reason is.
Yeah, you have to be proactive with them. I've noticed that
you can't just sit back.
You can't just sit there and hope that they call you and give you updates, because that's not the way Tesla works. You have to be on top of them. You got to keep bugging them.
Squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Yeah, exactly. However, there's some saving grace, Anthony, because we're coming to the end of the fourth quarter, and Tesla wants to deliver every car that they can. That's true. Right? So maybe you might get a nice Christmas present. Who knows? So, yeah. All the best to you.
We don't want to assume. Or a box.
Well, yes, okay. We can't. Well, yeah, we can't make any assumptions here. So, yes, best of luck to you. Keep us in the loop. If you get your car, we'd love to hear from you. I might have 2 very close friends of mine right now that are waiting on their cars with bated breath. One of them has a delivery date that was delayed by 3 days, and the other one is I have to touch base with him and see whether he's getting his car, but he was delayed to the end of December. So obviously they want to deliver every car that they can.
And then you get a referral code that you get to use to other people so they become owners
baby.
Too.
Yeah, I hope you guys, if you're ordering cars, use somebody's referral code. Get yourself some of that free supercharging. It's awesome. All right, last question of the evening comes from Eric. He says, as evidenced by the recent Autopilot accident where the Tesla service vehicle rear-ended the police vehicle, will Tesla eventually be adding the capability to detect and react to stop vehicles in one's path? I had this happen to me today, where I had to take over and manually stop my car because my Model 3 on Autopilot didn't seem like it was going to stop for a car completely stopped ahead of me at a stoplight. Yeah. It's coming. The latest software update that's gone out to most of the fleet now is 2019.40.2.1, and other than Canada, we don't have the stoplight and the stop sign detection. So at this point, I'm not really willing to risk my life to see whether it sees a car in front of me to be able to stop in front. But again, remember, these are not fully autonomous vehicles. They're not, you're supposed to be the safety driver, so be attentive. I think it's something that's going to be coming in due time. It's just a matter of where in the priority list is this coming. So
the autonomous special that we talked about this episode showed videos of crashes just like that.
Yep.
And if there's one thing we've preached on this show time and time again is don't ever assume the computer knows, okay? You're behind the wheel of the car. If you are in an accident like that, you are responsible. Period. End of case. Shut the fridge. Shut the front door. I don't care. That's it. That's it. So I get it. People want to have that experience. And I'm sitting here going, listen, I've been behind my car and I hear that, and I'm already slowing down because the car is doing the calculation in its own computer brain that you may not be able to stop in time. I'm alerting you of the potential disaster. And that's where the car in front of me that I know is stopped, or at least is almost at a complete stop on traffic or whatever. And I've yet to have a really, really close call. So I've never experienced that where there's a car like dead stop in front of me that I'm like, I don't see it. Let's see if AP does it. No, I'm gonna decelerate here just because I feel like it may or may not do it. You never know. There could be some environmental condition. A camera's not covered. There's a shadow effect. I'm under a bridge. Who knows? And it may not do it. So until we're at level 4, level 5, folks, hey, always slow down your car. Don't think the car's going to do it.
I only use Autopilot when I know that traffic is fairly light. I don't trust it in heavy traffic. The other day we had a very bad day, like full-on fog, like almost couldn't see outside. I mean, you're to bet I'm not going to be using Autopilot. I mean, I have used Autopilot in light fog before. As long as it sees the lines, it's pretty okay. But if I can't see, I know there's radar in the car and it sees quite well and stuff, but if I can't see it, I don't trust it enough.
And we don't know if that guy was paying attention or not. I mean, maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But if he wasn't, then that's why the crash happened, because he put too much faith in the computer to do it for him. Right. And he's looking at his phone, his iPad, he's playing with his dog in the back seat, and who knows what he was doing. But yeah, it's when these accidents happen, I largely think that's the result of the human not paying attention. It's not all the time. for sure.
Distracted driving is a real thing.
It's a major problem. Major problem.
It's a major problem. I always put my phone down in the cubby and I stop. I mean, I get my podcast going and that's the end of it. I don't touch my phone.
Do not disturb.
That's just me, though. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of the show. And since Ian hasn't had a lot to say tonight, unfortunately, not that we have, maybe it's because we didn't give him much of an edge.
For
but,
one time, I'm talking about Springs, and of course, Mr. Hogg, the show here, is like, "Ooh, let's let him go."
No, that's okay. All right, Ian, you go first. What do you want to plug tonight before we kick
just
out
the usual
of
stuff. You can find me on Twitter at Ian Pavelko, at Tesla Owners Online Forum. The Mad Hungarian is the handle, and of course, as Mr. Camacho is kindly demonstrating, and this is why I love him, the Weapons of Mass Adoption shirt is currently what's being featured here. And
Turn around, Eric.
Find that, yes, and of course, the backside of that would be. There we go,
baby.
the Model 3 sign. So you can find that, and of course the whole EvolveWare shirt, which now includes the Model Y and perhaps soon to be a Cybertruck.
Yes, I need the Cybertruck.
You can find all of those fine things at teespring.com, teespring.com. Look in the show notes. I'm sure Mr. Page will put that up for us. So go to teespring.com and look up Mad Hungarian EvolveWare, and you will find that.
Awesome. Thank you, Ian. How about you, Eric? What do you want to plug?
Times of the essence. Twitter.com/ECFix. Have a good day.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you for taking all those wonderful show notes on that wonderful documentary. Again, I will put yes, and like I said, I'll put links down to as many places I can find that you can look at this legally. We will not, admonish anybody.
Why the quote marks? That's not helpful.
I live in Canada, and I'm looking at the PBS site, and it says, this video is not available in your area. Screw you.
Can I just jump in for 10 seconds how I managed to watch the show again, because I wanted to see it, is if you get one of these IP address emulator things that will show you as being...
Oh, the DNS spoofing, yeah. Or the VPN.
Exactly, one of these VPN.
We're not sponsored by NordVPN, by the way.
We're not. If you get one of those, you can then sign up with any of the affiliate PBS stations, just $5 for a month, and you can watch any of the shows. And
there you go.
It goes to a good cause,
yes.
Eric's point. So that's what I would recommend.
Great content.
There you go. All right, so if you want to follow me, check it out on Twitter. The handle's at Model3Owners. Don't forget, we have a lively forum at TeslaOwnersOnline.com, and you can find me on there if you want to follow me. The handle's TrevP. And, by the way, today is December 11th, is it not? Today's the last day if you want to get some shirts off our Teespring site there, the Tesla Owners one, that will ship out in time for the holidays. If it doesn't matter to you, well, order whenever you want. I've got a whole bunch of new stuff in there. Anyways, that's it for tonight, and we will see you on the next one. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you later.
Aloha means goodbye.
Bonsoir tout le monde.